I start by welcoming you all to this inaugural webinar of the Bristol Trustee Group, which is being hosted for us by Bristol Law Society. Can I say also at the outset that this is being recorded so that you will be able to view it via a link afterwards, and others will be able to view it as well. Also, we're going to be taking Q&As in the second half of this session. I'll explain how the session is going to work in a minute. But you'll find that there is a tab at the bottom of your screen which says Q&A. So if you'd like to start posting your questions as we go along, we'll then, as I say, pick them up in the second half of this session. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Peter Morris. I was managing partner of Burgess Salmon for 8 years, and amongst other things, I now chair the Bristol Legal Sector Community Engagement Group. This is a collaboration between legal professionals in the region and includes law firms, barristers' chambers, judges, cost firms, and law faculties in our universities. And our principal aim is to promote and support community engagement activities in the legal sector in the region. The Bristol Trustee Group is a subgroup of the Community Engagement Group and Bristol Pro Bono. It's an initiative spawned by the COVID pandemic in response to the difficulties faced by many organisations in the voluntary sector since the March lockdown, and in particular to support the trustees of those organisations and people who are thinking of becoming trustees who are having to make difficult decisions to ensure that their organisations not only survive, but also provide services for which there is an increasing demand. That group is very ably chaired by Jamie Cameron of Burgess Salmon, and this session has been organised by Caroline Bush of Osborne Clark. Thank you both. We're delighted to be joined by a very experienced panel of speakers with leading roles in community organisations. Sandra Meadows, who's the CEO of Voscur, Mark Porch, who's the Chief Executive of Brace, John Steenlet, who's Pro Bono Coordinator for City Funds, and Sandy Hicks, Head of the Charity Practice at Moon Executive Search. Thank you all for agreeing to participate in this event. Now, the format will be about 25 minutes or so of presentations from our 4 speakers, followed by about 30 minutes of Q&A for our wider panel. I will try and finish this event at 2 on the dot, because I'm sure you're all very busy. The aim is for it to be, in the second part at least, as interactive as possible to answer your questions and help you perform your roles as trustees even better. Without more ado, I'll ask Sandra to set the scene for us by giving us an overview of the needs of our community. Sandra.
Thank you, Peter, and hello to everyone. It's a real joy and an honour to be with you this afternoon. I'm actually going to share my screen and just flip through a few slides, and what I'm aiming to do today is to just give you a bit of context and an overview in terms of the sorts of things that the sector is looking at the moment, but also a sort of just a couple of slides on the sorts of things that we are looking for and some of the key things about the roles. So I'm Sandra Meadows, Chief Executive of Voscur. For those of you who don't know Voscur is the support and development agency for the voluntary community and social enterprise sector in Bristol. Been around for about 25 years, so got a long history of supporting and developing the sector here. I just wanted to land us all on the same page, really. You'll hear various descriptions of the sector, VCSE, VCS, third sector, etc. What we're talking about is voluntary community social enterprise organisations that are independent from government, whether they're local or national government. I can't tell you the number of times people have said, oh, Voscur, you're a part of the council, aren't you? We very definitely are not, and we're fiercely independent in the sector. Cause or value driven, and you'll hear more about the double-edged sword of that position of being cause driven, and of course reinvesting any surpluses or profit, and I put profit with an exclamation mark behind it because some of us are very comfortable talking about profit, as you might do in the business world, and some parts of the sector are very definitely not comfortable talking about profit. So just getting you used to sort of language, etc. So unpacking the BCSC, there are thousands of different types of organisations, and not to scare you, but this is a sort of a quick overview of the types of organisations that we're talking about. Not all charities, although we're probably going to focus on that a bit today. But there is a range of different ways that organisations will describe themselves, and you'll see some of them there. So what's going on currently for the sector? Well, prior to COVID-19, the lockdown, the national pandemic, we had been working pretty well, very effectively, at moving the sector forward. What we were very focused on, and remain so, even more so now perhaps, is shifting the sector from grant dependency to a sector which was more financially independent. And you'll hear a bit more about development of enterprise, but essentially what's happening right now is that we are conducting whole sector research, and this was really triggered by COVID-19. It's a partnership approach. You'll hear infrastructure mentioned, I think, at points during today. We are an infrastructure organisation, as our Black South West Network, they're the BSWN in that list, Voscur Locality, Quartet and Bristol City Council working together for the first time on the future of the sector. Out of the research will come a new strategy in 2021, which will set our objectives for the short, medium and long term. One of the important changes that's happened in the sector, in perhaps maybe the last 5 years or so, is the real strong emergence of enterprising and trading for VCSE organisations. Two key programmes in the city, Bristol City Funds programme, and both Peter and myself sit on the board for City Funds, and you'll hear more about that from John Steinert in a bit, but also something called a local access programme. All of these things are very focused on shifting organisations and the sector towards a more sustainable model. As Peter's mentioned, there is absolutely substantially increased need out there in terms of what's happening on the front line and how citizens need to be supported. So not just an increase in the volume, if you like, there's a great increase in the complexity as some public services have dwindled and changed, and changes within the health sector, adult social care would be a focus. The VCSE sector organisations start to pick up and respond to those needs, but it is becoming incredibly difficult to manage all of that. So there's a lot of complexity out there. There is also, we know, a need to focus on equalities-led organisations, and that is across the whole gamut of equalities, so race, disability, LGBTQ, all of those need attention and focus because of the disproportionate impact of either social or economic changes on those particular groups. And of course, the overall need to focus on sustainability and resilience in a changed market and a changed world. So that's a sort of roundup of what's happening for us right now in Bristol. If I take that back down to a community group level, for example, increasingly, these are the sorts of things that community groups are asking for in terms of support from trustees. Top of the list, legal and financial expertise. Of course, planning. Now, this is a real shift because there's more trading and enterprise ability, and we really want to embed that in the sector. Knowledge around trading, changes to legal status, asset acquisition or management, building or land, that could be. All of that sort of area is definitely growing as a need for us. You've got the typical ones that will always be there. HR is a very big one. Digital and IT, and something around data management, how the sector works with data, how it manages data, and of course, just being digitally included, because COVID-19 has exposed rather a lot of issues around the sector in terms of digital inclusion or exclusion in this case. I do remember when I first started in this role, talking about CSR, talking about volunteering and all the rest of that. I completely understand when corporate organisations or companies want to have programmes whereby their staff would work with a particular charity and do really good things, really effective things, like helping them, I don't know, update their building. I suppose part of the plea from the sector is, that's brilliant, we welcome that, but we are shifting, and what we really need is for our supporters and our friends and our helpers and trustees to shift with us. It's not so much about, I suppose, painting a shed, and I'm glad that you're here because this is what, why you've joined this webinar, I suspect. It's about doing a bit more than that. I just wanted to say something about avoiding culture shock, and I'll always say this when I speak to another sector. My advice in this respect is to do your research, fully understand the organisational culture. In my experience, this is where things can go wrong a little in terms of trustees, and perhaps Andy will say a bit more about getting the fit right. But overall, it's to be patient and be aware of the differences between the BCSE culture and perhaps the culture that you're working with. What we don't want is to engage fantastic trustees and then lose them because the pace is very different. It's sometimes quite challenging. So just be aware of that in your mind, that you're coming into a completely different culture and it does take a bit of time. Here I may well lead into something that Mark is going to say, but one of the massively important things is know the boundaries of a role as a trustee. It's understanding, and it's very easy to slip out of this, it's understanding that board members are strategic, staff are operational. So it's not about doing it, it's about making sure it gets done. I'm not going to go through this entire slide in the interest of time, but it's just to sort of give an indication of the way that the BCSE approaches trustee recruitment, the sorts of things we tell groups to look for when they're thinking about attracting trustees. And overall, my message would be thank you, but don't worry, you need to celebrate what you do. The fact that you're here and interested is fantastic. Seek advice and help if you need it, and work together as a team. You know that the Bristol particularly is working with the One City approach and the One City plan. That's fully embedded. So we're encouraging everyone, all the partners that we work with, to work in this way as well. And thank you. We look forward to building mutually beneficial and effective relationships with you. There's the contact details which will be shared with you should you need any further information or support. And at that point, I will stop sharing. I hope that wasn't too much of a canter through, but I'm here for any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Sandra, for that. That was a very, very helpful contextual introduction for this session. Mark, can I now turn to you to tell us something about the role trustees play in community organisations from your perspective as a chief executive of a well-known one in the area?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. I've been asked to illustrate, as Peter's just said, the work that trustees do in charities and community organisations. And given the huge variety of charities that there are, and the even greater variety of people who become trustees, in 5 minutes that can't be comprehensive. It is a snapshot, and I hope your imaginations will take it from there. The Charity Commission website will tell you what the duties of a trustee are. It's a dry tick box approach to informing prospective trustees, and it's unlikely to inspire anyone, I have to say. It might even put you off. Government websites tend to be what I call waggy finger, which means they want to make you think of all the disapproving noises you'll hear if you slip up even once. However, unfortunately, and fortunately, the reality should be, and in my experience almost always is, much better than that. A trustee uses knowledge and experience to help a good cause that they care about. That's the key thing. I speak as CEO of a small charity, income under £1 million, but also with past experience of being a trustee in a different charity and volunteering elsewhere. But the best way I can illustrate what trustees do is to focus on how we do things at the charity that I work for, Brace Dementia Research, and give you some examples from within that. At Brace, we have almost twice as many trustees, 11, as we have employees, 6. And I agree very strongly with Sandra that it's important to keep the employee-trustee distinction. The trustees should be distinct, so it should be strategic, not operational. But that will vary, what that actually means according to the size of the organisation. Clearly in a charity that employs no one, which is most charities, that role is necessarily going to be different. And the smaller the charity, I think generally the more hands-on the allocated role to the trustee will be. But what is important is that however strategic they are, they have a defined role. That helps them get more satisfaction from their work and enables the charity to get the best from them. Illustrations from within Brace. For example, we have an accountant who helps oversee financial strategy. She doesn't do the financial record keeping. We employ a bookkeeper for that purpose. But she can help make sure that we're financially sound by checking things from time to time, and she helps me and the trustees with financial planning. We have a solicitor. She's not a charity lawyer. When we want charity law expertise, we instruct someone. She's a private client solicitor who has expertise in a demographic which is very relevant to a dementia-related charity like us. She also happens to be superb at the marketing and fundraising, so whoever said lawyers had to be formal. An obvious need for a dementia research charity is scientists, and we have 2 professors of neuroscience. We couldn't fund research responsibly without having their expertise, their level of understanding at board level. And likewise, we have 2 doctors who know about dementia from a clinical perspective. Another trustee has a strong corporate background, and she knows how to put together a business plan, balancing caution with risk. All these very valuable contributions to the work of the board. I'm not going to go through the entire board, to your relief, I'm sure. But the point is that we try to identify the skills that we need and recruit the types of trustees we need to fulfill those roles. And as a result, our trustees are making a huge contribution. I would advise anybody who's thinking about becoming a trustee to look at what their skill set is. And that's skills gained not just in their profession, but elsewhere, including soft skills. All these things matter. And I've had some very good advice from Sandra just now about the range of skills that charities are typically looking for. What matters just as much, however, as a final comment, is what your passion is. If your greatest concern is the natural environment, being a museum trustee is probably not for you. If you care most about refugees, why offer your skills to the local cats home? Volunteer for what really motivates you, because it's that passion that will fire you and give you a sense of having made an important difference at the end of your work. Thank you.
Mark, thanks very much indeed. Interesting comments. Just before we move on to John, can I just remind you that we are taking Q&A, but because of the number of people, we can only do it in writing, so to speak. So use the tab at the bottom of your screen which says Q&A, and then Helen Reid of Bristol Law Society will be keeping an eye on them for us. So do get your questions coming in, please. John, can I hand over to you at this point and talk to us about how this all links in with Pro Bono?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Peter. Before I begin, I just want to say, just like Sandra, I think the fact that you've even taken the time out today to find out more about being a trustee is fantastic. And perhaps a number of you will go on to become one of the 700,000 or so trustees across England and Wales. I say that because I don't know the statistics for Scotland. But that equates to an estimated £3.4 billion contribution through the time and services. And that's a survey report according to the Charity Commission. That's a huge difference. I'm John Steenlett, and I'm from Bristol City Funds, which has been mentioned a couple of times so far. Without going into too great a depth, Bristol City Funds is a unique collaboration between businesses, community organisations, funders, and the public sector in Bristol to share resources and help address key priorities in Bristol. It aims to do this through funding solutions that target the causes and effects of inequality, and also, though, by brokering pro bono support for voluntary and community organisations, social enterprise, so VCSE organisations. As you'll be aware, there are many ways that charities and community organisations can be supported a huge way to do this is through harnessing the vast range of skills and knowledge that exist already amongst people working across all manner of businesses, and indeed, well, yes, the public sector as well. In February this year, Bristol City Funds, through the Quartet Community Foundation, commissioned a piece of research into demand for pro bono or free skills sharing support within the voluntary sector in Bristol. And a resounding 97% of all the 230 respondents to the survey said that their organisation would benefit from pro bono support. But only 50% had previously received any kind of support like this, which does reflect some of the incredible partnerships that have and do exist between businesses and the voluntary sector. However, there's, evidently a huge demand for more, and many of the organisations that haven't benefited from this kind of support simply don't have the networks and the know-how to access it. As Sandra also mentioned earlier, pro bono support can come in all shapes and sizes, from simply answering a question that the charity might not know the answer to. That could be a very big legal question, or a very sort of quick to answer question. So, to give some examples, charities could be looking for guidance on purchasing, whether that's for a cafe that they're running, so purchasing for ingredients, but through to admin processes, managing the facilities that they have, logistics, for example, delivering food, support with developing HR policies and procedures, guidance on specific HR. It could be guidance on a specific HR matter with some volunteers or an employee. Managing staff and volunteer rotas, for example. Then there's marketing, social media strategy, IT support, website development, helping an organization to look at revenue generation, such as hiring out an asset, for example. There's legal advice, which talking to the right audience here, and whether that's commercial property, leases, intellectual property and copyright, governance, GDPR, HR related employment and legal advice. And then there's this support with strategic business planning, financial modeling, accounting and VAT, and general coaching and mentoring. So that's just to name a few examples, but so you might imagine that the list could go on and on. But working within with a voluntary organisation in any number of ways can also be a stepping stone towards becoming a trustee. It could build your experience within the voluntary sector at a pace of your choice as well. As we've said, and as you'll know, it's now is currently a more critical time than ever for the voluntary organisations that are providing vital frontline services across our community, as we've seen even more so this year. But whatever level of commitment people are able to make, whether it's answering a question or getting involved with more longer term strategic planning and legal advice. But what we do know is that people from all aspects of business have something fantastic to share. Thank you. Any questions, I'd be delighted to answer them shortly.
Thanks very much, John.
Thank you.
Sandy, can we turn to you to tell us something about the trusteeships from a perspective of a recruiter, how to find the right role, how to prepare for its skill sets, where to look, all that sort of thing. Thanks.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So thank you for letting me be part of this training session today. As a quick introduction, my name's Sandy Hinks and I head up the charity practice at Moon Executive Search, and we're based in Bristol and London. The business is 20 years old. Meant to be having our party this year, but that's not happening. So 21st birthday next year. So I've been honoured to work with lots of different charities over the last few years, several newly formed charities that required a whole new board, as well as some really well established charities. So one that I recently worked on was 800 years old. And different types as well, from community interest companies, charitable incorporated organisations, but we also recruit CEOs, the FDs and the HDs as well. So I appreciate we're talking about trustees today. So I've placed about 60 trustees in the last 2 years. And the first thing everybody needs to do is to have a clear plan of what is right for you. So what social causes are you like to support and you're interested in? I know this has been mentioned previously, because it's your time that you're committing and your energy. You need to feel connected to the charity, and that will help you in making decisions at trustee meetings. You need to have a genuine passion to help and achieve those aims and goals of that charity. And having that invested interest will do that. So I would say don't apply for the first trustee role you see. Again, if that social cause doesn't interest in you, then I would suggest you wait. Because again, it's your time that you're giving up. And in time, if that interest isn't there, the commitment of attending a meetings and events may turn into an unnecessary chore. So that's my first question to anybody that's looking for trustee work is, why do you want to be part of this charity? And I can usually tell by people's reactions and responses, obviously, if they've got a genuine interest. So again, think about your skill set. What can you bring and where can you add value? And again, most charities are quite clear at the front what they're looking for. Think about the time, as in how much time do you really have? So like again, smaller charities tend to look for trustees that are more hands-on and can sometimes rely on them getting involved in subgroups or projects. Meetings again can be held more frequently, so sometimes they can be 8 times a year. Larger, more well-established charities may have a lighter touch with their trustees and arrange meetings 4 to 5 times a year. But most boards keep a day back to help with that strategic planning. So where do you look? So you can approach a specialist search consultant, somebody like myself that knows the market well. I would suggest you go with a registered recruiter who is REC a member, and that will give you the protection of a fair and compliant recruitment process as with a qualified recruitment consultant or business. So the REC is a UK-based organisation, and that shows you as a candidate and as a client the sign of quality, and we work to a strict code of practice. So no REC recruiter should charge you a fee for applying or registering to find you your next trustee role, because it is actually illegal. You would then have an initial discussion based upon, similar to the above, with me. And then when a trustee role comes up and I think it suits your needs or they're similar, we would have a more formal interview to discuss that charity. And then obviously then I would try and make an introduction. So most charities would like CVs, bios or profiles, and they usually ask for an expression of interest. You could also approach your favourite charity and express an interest in them direct. Most charities have websites with a work for us section, and they advertise the need for new trustees. There are a number of search engines you can use. So Voscur being one that I use. Thank you, Sandra. Bar in the Community is a national website. Nedworks, charityjobs.co.uk, and jobs at Third Sector, LinkedIn, The Guardian, and womenonboards.net are just a few you could look at. You can also look at becoming a volunteer and getting involved with your favourite charity, because that's a great way to find out more about the charity and for them to see you and for them to get an understanding of what you can do and bring, and it will get you close to those key members of the charity. And again, your network, speak to other trustees within your organisation, and spread the word around that you are looking for a trustee role, because charity boards do tend to use their existing trustees and ask them to use their networks to find new members. So just to very quickly give you an example of a couple of trustees that I've placed. So I made an introduction of a lawyer who had a very strong commercial background within the retail sector. This charity was setting up a cafe, And that skill set, that person, was extremely useful for them at the beginning part of their journey, because it was all to be agreeing the lease, reading through contracts, looking at the bids and tenders. So that person was taken on as a trustee. Another person that I got involved with was an art lawyer. So that person had a very good understanding of commercial art market. They had a good network within the art world. And they also had a strong connection and passion to the city of Bristol. And this was a charity that had an involvement with an art gallery here in Bristol. And that person was taken on as a trustee. And very lastly, I put a criminal barrister in. He had lots of experience within local authorities and some public sector organisations. But he was a really keen sportsman, and he was a really good fundraiser. And this charity was all on about focused on healthy living, using public spaces, and it was working with some of the councils, so they took him on as well. So I wish you well in your search for your next trustee. Do contact me, and we can arrange a confidential chat. So that's me done. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. That's really interesting. You've had a range of views about what trusteeships are about, how you get into them, and that sort of thing. Do keep your questions coming. We've got a couple at the moment, which I think look as though they're heading straight towards Sandy, actually. But particularly the second question, the other members of the panel may be able to assist. So the first question is from Andrew. So in terms of learning of relevant charities seeking assistance from trustees, what are the best sources, mailing list, websites, Guardian listings, etc.? Sandy, you gave a significant list. I don't know if you want to sort of add to that or address that particular question any way. You're on mute. No, you're still on mute.
Yeah, I got it now. Yeah, I mean, again, you know, I always say approach charities that you like the look of, that you want to work with. I mean, it can be a little bit hit and miss, but there's no harm in asking direct and getting in touch with people and saying that I'm interested in your charity. Do you have any openings? And again, like I say, all those websites that I've mentioned, yeah, I mean, be proactive and ask if I was you. And like I say, use your networks as well. So,
yeah, thanks for that. Well,
can I add to that, Peter?
Yeah, you go. Sure.
I would say, so Voscur on its website runs what we call a jobs page. It's been going for many years. It's quite successful. So I would say locally, most charities will contact us and get us to put an ad up for a trustee. You can filter by paid and unpaid on that website, and therefore the trusteeships will come up under the roles. And that's locally.
Yeah. Thanks. Mark.
Yeah, yes. Just add to that, to reinforce what Sandy said about being proactive, contacting the charities that you find most interesting. There may be more opportunities than are being advertised. And for example, one of the ways that Brace at the moment is trying to find future trustees is to involve people with particular skill sets in the work outside the board done by the trustees in committees and working groups, and that brings people into contact with the charity, and it might be that they will go on to become trustees. In the meantime, whether they do or don't, they're contributing. So if you approach charities you care about, they might well have that kind of voluntary role in between ordinary volunteer and trustee that might eventually evolve into something else.
Thanks for that, Mark. Any of our other panelists have a comment on this one? In which case, I'll move on to the next question. And forgive me if I mispronounce your name. Is it Shahidur? Anyway, thank you for your question. You say, I'm a junior litigation lawyer with over 3 years experience in law, but have also experience in community radio, mentoring, race equality councils, judging, yet I'm struggling in my applications to be a trustee. It seems like you need to belong to some kind of elite group to even be considered for a trustee position. I'd be grateful for any advice the panel has to offer for succeeding in the quest for a trusteeship. Who wants to start off with that one? Because there's quite a lot in that one. One is relative youth as well, I think, is being talked about there. Am I too young to be a trustee? The answer is no to that. But
I think, do you mind if I say, I think that what we're hearing there is someone who has skills and is happy to offer them, and somehow it's not working for them. So I think that that's the bit that I want to focus on, because I think there is some other stuff in there. I think, as Sandy said, it's really important that if you hit these blockers, or if you hit any kind of barrier, that you speak, you get some advice. You could talk to Moon, you could talk to Voscur, but people that know about the recruitment of trustees. It sounds as if there may be a particular issue there, so I would encourage that person to get in touch with either, because there is a particular, that there is a market in Bristol. I talk about the BCS sector as in terms of a market. And just like any other sector, there are all sorts of operations within that, and all sorts of ways that people, you know, will run their organisations. I would be really disappointed if it were in any way evident that there was this elite group. there's certainly, from our point of view, there is no elitism in this. It's absolutely the skills and expertise that the organisations need. So I think if you've hit a particular barrier, that's the moment to reach out and get some help and advice.
I'd like to just say I'm recruiting at the moment for a charity in London, and they didn't actually need a particular skill set with this one. They just needed that community understanding and knowledge of the area that they live in, or they operate in. So, and you know, and I'll always encourage first-time trustees to apply for roles, because, like I say, you know, you can come with new ideas and hopefully freshen up the board and make things happen. So yeah, so it's that community understanding as well as your professional.
It's also really important that we massively increase the diversity on our boards in the sector. So, you know, again, you know, I'm slightly disappointed that someone who appears to be from a background that would be welcomed has found barriers. So, but that's a really important point. We are driving the increase of diversity across all of our boards.
So I'll chip in here if I may. I think the point you made, Sandra, about getting some help, so that you actually probably better understand your own skill sets, are able to articulate them in a way which is meaningful to the organisations which you're looking at. I can talk about it from sort of experience. Towards the end of my career, I was looking for roles, and I didn't really see the need to sell myself too much. I thought, well, it's obvious, isn't it? And you know, a sort of maybe a sort of arrogance, complacency, or whatever it is. But actually, there are people out there who can help you to position yourself and then make the best of the skills you've got and direct them towards the organisations which you want to join. So do seek help. That's what I'd say to that one. Any other of our panellists have anything to add to that one? Interesting question. Right. A question from Anna. I've previously been a school governor, and I'm now considering, oh, sorry, I've lost the question. There it is. I've previously been a school governor. I'm now considering whether to take on a new role with a school or try to become a trustee. Would becoming a trustee be a big step up, or is it broadly equivalent? Now, that's very interesting from somebody who's been a school governor and all that entails. Who would like to start us off with that one? Have any of our panel been school governors? So, right, okay. I'll start with Mark on this one and then come to you, Sandra. Look, how do these things compare? Because interestingly, we were talking about this group, the Bristol Trustee Group, whether it should be extended to governorships as well. We'll start with trusteeships and leave school governorships for the time being, but kick us off.
I was a primary school governor at one time, but it's quite a few years ago, more than 20. And I know that the government in about 15 years ago introduced a number of new tighter restrictions on school governors. I'm not sure restrictions is quite the right word, but it became a lot more onerous, and school governors were getting a little bit upset about it all. the impression I've got is that in a well-run charity, being a trustee should be no more onerous and might well be less onerous. But it depends very much on the charity. I think if you're thinking of becoming a trustee, you need to look very hard at how that charity is run, the way the induction process is handled, or is the interview process. Do they seem to know what they're doing? Is everything going to be dumped on you, or is there a defined role where you can contribute and be part of a well-oiled machine? So I don't think there's a simple answer to that. I suppose it depends on the school as well. But I don't think anybody should see becoming a charity trustee as necessarily more difficult or scarier than being a school governor. Anything but.
Sandra.
I'm smiling because I remember when I became a school governor, a secondary school governor, and in my head, thought it might be the PTA and cutting a ribbon and making cakes. Oh my goodness, it was anything but. Schools are big businesses, frankly. I think there are very few voluntary sector organisations that will operate at the financial scale of any of our schools these days. And that was a massive steep learning curve for me, is that at secondary level, that's my experience, and then at the City of Bristol College, we're talking about schools with tens of millions of pounds worth of turnover. If you can operate at that level, imagine what you can bring to a small voluntary sector organisation, and most of them are going to be smaller than that. So I'd say absolutely transferable skills. It's a leap in a different way. Mark is right, it's a different approach. But think about transferable skills. If you can operate at that level, working with a school, then you absolutely have something to bring to the sector, and we welcome it. So don't be in any way afraid. It's likely to be easier in some ways and more complex in others in terms of how you work with people and the pace that I mentioned before. But schools are big businesses, so we'd love those skills.
Indeed, I'll just add a comment. I've always shied away from being a school governor because I've always viewed it as being too onerous. So there we are. Don't know if I'm right in doing that or not. Any other comments from our panel? Jamie, I don't know if you're around or not, but I know you are both a trustee and a school governor, I believe, and I just wondered if you had anything to say.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I'm not actually a school governor, but yeah, a couple of trustees and on different steering groups. I'd echo from speaking to friends and colleagues. I would see the governor role as a more significant role generally than a trustee role. One thing that's come out, a couple of points that's come out from the session to me, actually, if I've got an opportunity to say something, is one, there seems to be a real need in Bristol for trustees, and there seems to be a real desire within firms and organisations for the people in the legal sector to become trustees, and it would be good to find a way of matching those two needs and desires. So that's something that we were thinking about as part of this group, and I know Mark, Sandy, Sandra, we sort of started discussions around that, and I wonder if that's something we can take forwards. But it'd be really useful, I suppose, to gauge the interest levels from people who've been involved in this webinar, and if you actively want to take on a role, understanding that and thinking about how we can find the best fit moving forwards. And another point I think that came out to me, just worth mentioning particularly for the lawyers on the webinar, is there is a huge need for legal support, but going on to a board does not mean that you become the board's legal advisor, and I think it's actually important to be very careful about the role that you play on the board. So you may, and I think inevitably I've probably crossed the line and given legal advice where I felt comfortable doing so, but that should be giving effectively business advice based on your legal experience. What you should be doing is trying to identify where there is a legal issue where specific advice is needed. Now that may be possible for you to obtain through pro bono support, and John I know can perhaps help broker some of those relationships, and our roles within firms might help broker some of those arrangements. but there will also be cases where actually paid for advice is needed. So don't think that because you're going on to a board you're taking on full responsibility for all legal issues. That absolutely isn't the case, and it's really important both from your own perspective but also for the firms or the chambers legal insurance that you're not taking on that role. So I think there's something that we need to think about again in terms of supporting people taking on the roles, is that we're clear and the organisations that are taking on trustees understand the basis on which they're coming on, so that we're not going on as legal advisors.
Thanks, Jamie. Can I just pick up on a couple of the points that you made? The first one was talking about demand for trustee roles, and I just wondered if Sandy and Sandra could, between them, say something about the demand. Is there a significant shortage of trustees? Is there an oversupply of trustees? So, for example, in the legal sector, a lot of lawyers think that they might get non-exec director roles when they've finished in their careers. They're very few and far between, and you're more likely to get one actually if you're an accountant than if you are a solicitor, even if you've got relevant experience. But in the trustee world, what's demand and supply looking like?
I think there's more demand than supply. If you imagine that most organisations, you want in fact we were talking about this the other day, that in terms of numbers, you need to be able to get the business done, you need to be able to be core and to make decisions, and that will tie back to your memorandum and articles of association, whatever your governing documents say about being core, etc. But in my experience, most voluntary sector organisations have less than their total number allowable. So they may have a trustee board that can go up to 15. Typically they'll have 10 or less. And if you think about who turns up to meetings, that's probably a regular 5. So if you think of it in those terms, there is always a need. So I think the demand is probably higher than supply at the moment, because we need to get the fit right and get the right people into the right places. But also we have to challenge organisations to really think about what it is they need, so that we don't have the situation where we're just recruiting people to make numbers. We want them to be really focused on the business and what the business needs, and to increase the number and the diversity through that route. So I'd say at the moment there's still a huge demand for the right type of people to become trustees.
The second point that Jamie mentioned was, given the fact that the majority of the people on this in this webinar are lawyers or people in the legal sector, is there something specific that you're, or not necessarily specific, that you're looking for from trustees with a legal background? Mark's spoken about one of his trustees, and actually the much broader skills that she brings to his organisation. But again, your experience of legal people in this space would be interesting to hear.
It's very different, very varied. It depends on what the organisation is doing, where the development is going. So if one acquires an asset, then that will take them down a particular legal route. For example, for Voscur at the moment, we are seeking a legal person to look at legal due diligence around a potential merger. Not many of those conversations will be happening. We hope more in the future. So it's as varied as the sector is. There's no hard and fast answer there. It is about really focusing on that particular organisation and assessing their needs. I think general legal knowledge around charities, around the types of legal structures that these organisations could be, is really important. If there was a sort of blanket level of skill, I would say that that would be an important one. Understand the different legal structures and how the organisation can operate within that. And that, I think, would be really helpful across the sector, because sometimes what you get is a person who has a particular view of a charity, but when they read the articles and the mems and arts, etc., they discover that it's not at all what they thought it was. So do the background research, understand how our organisations are formed, and what they are, what they have to do, whether it's for the Charities Commission, Companies House, or whoever. That, I say, was a blanket sort of need.
Sandy, do you have a view on that one in particular?
No, again, like Sandra said, I mean, the types of trustees I get asked for is very varied. And again, you know, for me, it's always making sure that person's got that interest and that passion in the charity, and reaching out. And from us, it's reaching out also to the networks as well, different networks and communities in and around the area. And I think sometimes trustee boards struggle to get that network and reach out and get that message across that they're looking. So again, at Moon, you know, we've got quite a varied network of different groups and people that we'll reach out and say, look, you might not be necessarily looking for a trustee, but you know somebody that is, and that works really well for us. So, yeah, so again, diversity as well is key for these boards.
I'm sure. And to what extent is there an understanding within these organisations that lawyer trustees may be there to sort of spot issues, but not necessarily to give legal advice? Because I've certainly found it in my situation that it might not be my specialist area. There's a tendency for boards to look to you as a lawyer for the answer. And I wonder to what extent there is that real expectation within the sector. You do give the answer, or you steer them or help them towards finding where they can get the type of advice they really need. I appreciate small things, you can't afford the advice. Bigger things, then, you know, there comes a time when you can't get a pro bono, you may have to pay for it. Any thoughts about that? In terms of your expectation of lawyers giving legal advice?
I wasn't sure if you were directing that to me, or was that just generally?
Well, generally, but partly to you, Sandra, because you were talking about what...
I think it's really important, and I think Mark mentioned this earlier, it's really important that roles are defined and we stay within the parameters of those roles.
Yep.
You get into all sorts of issues around compliance and governance and all sorts of things where there's slippage from one to another. So I think it is really important that and it's work for the organisations as well, because if you're very focused on your front line and less interested in the back room or the engine, which is where governance sits, you may well ask your legal trustee to do all sorts of things just for expediency. So it's really important that everyone is clear where the parameters are and that further legal advice is sought. So, for example, I sit on a board where I am the lead for HR. I've got HR in my background, but I'm not qualified at CIPD. Do you see what I mean? So I would never dream of using my past experience to say I'm the expert and actually you need to do this because I say so. That's going down the wrong road. If it's something that is that critical and that important, you have to seek the appropriate advice from the appropriate experts.
Yep. Yeah, I'm happy with that one, Sandra. Thank you. Look, I've got a couple of questions here which I'd like to put in before our time is up. Although the second one it's too big for today. It's a subject in itself. But starting with the first one because it's different. Question. I'm afraid I don't know the questioner because it's just a telephone number. Is there a body of medical practitioners that are particularly interested in trustee work? Please advise. Is anyone able to pick that one up? Oh, sorry. I think that's probably a question we are unable to answer today. Sorry about that one. And the next question is, if I can find it.
Sorry, I think, Peter, it's Helen here. Sorry, I've just, I sent a message and it took it into the answers, but it's just to say that our next webinar on the 1st of October, we're just pulling that together. It should be with you all in the next day or so, but that's going to look at things like responsibilities. So hopefully that will give all the detail that Tiggy's after.
Yes, because Tiggy's question was not sure if this is a question that is relevant to today's conversation. It certainly is, but if you are considering becoming a trustee for a charity, what liabilities does that expose you to? Big question, and Helen's just sort of answered in a sense by saying that that is something that we will deal with in our next session. I'm just checking to see if there's any others. I think we picked up on them all. I think that's right.
Yes, I can't see any more, Peter.
Okay, well, look, we're fast approaching our time limit. So if I can just finish by saying I hope you found this webinar interesting. I hope you'll be interested in joining future webinars. We'll find a way, I think, if we can, of seeking your feedback about this session, and also inviting your ideas for future sessions, so that we can actually try and make these webinars as relevant as possible to you. So few thanks. Thanks to all our speakers. Thanks very much indeed for joining us today and for participating in this inaugural event, which is great. Thanks to Jamie and your trustee group for taking this initiative forward and for organising today's event. Thanks to Helen and Bristol Law Society for hosting us today and making sure that we're all up and running technologically, which is fantastic. And to all of the participants in this call, thank you very much indeed for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you in November. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.